I'm Karoliina Isoaho from the University of Helsinki. I'm a PhD student, and I guess I will present a more traditional presentation, presenting a paper that we're finalizing now. So it's called Changing Forest Stakeholders' Perception of Ecosystem Services with Linguistic Nudging. And in this paper, we're interested in examining the effects that viewing different kinds of information may have on stakeholder perceptions. And we're submitting it to the Journal of Ecosystem Services this month. And we're a big group of people working on this. We have people from the University of Helsinki, University of Jyväskylä and Oslo. And Daniel Burgas-Riera, is here today as well, who's been working on the topic. So what I will do today is I'll present the motivation and the objectives really briefly, and then I will spend some time on the research design, so on the nudge part, and then also explain the results that we've got. So the background for this paper is in the context of forest management in Finland. So rotation forest management has been the practice predominant for decades, and also the one that's still officially recommended by the official instructions. And it means even-aged trees and clear felling of logs. But recently there's more flexibility for forest owners to actually manage their forest land. So in 2014, the Finnish government introduced a new Forest Act, and it was expected to increase the use of continuous cover forestry, which is uneven-based forest management. And research has found that if we had more land than we currently have under CCF in Finland, that would be better for biodiversity and also have a positive impact on ecosystem services, including revenues from timber. However, changes to new practices has been really slow in Finland, and we haven't seen a lot of change towards CCF. And we are interested in the role of information interventions in communicating about these new practices. So existing literature has already shown that there's a link between informational interventions and preference change in forest management. And what they report is quite intriguing. They say that reactions to informational interventions depend very much on the ways in which information is adapted to existing internal representations at individual level. So, for example, it has been shown that forest stakeholders who hold strong opinions or attitudes about forest management practices tend to ignore new information, and especially if it contradicts their beliefs, their existing attitudes. And this has sparked our interest in exploring the use of nudging in informational interventions. So nudging is a concept developed by Thaler and Sunstein, and it basically refers to a soft policy instrument. The idea is that policymakers in a subtle way guide individuals towards making certain choices. And while nudging usually refers to changes in the physical environment, so for instance, changing the choice architecture so that people would choose a healthier snack rather than take a package of crisps, for instance, we are in this paper interested in the framing devices of nudging. So basically, how to reframe information and make it more salient to a particular audience. So this is our research question. Can linguistic nudges persuade forest owners and professionals to base their forestry management practices more on ecological than economic considerations? Okay, so now we get to the research design part. So Niina ja Masi Konkela created this survey, and we sent it out to forest owners and professionals across the country in Finland. So it's a nationwide survey. It's quite unprecedented in terms of scale and scope. And the survey comprised of two parts. So we had first a part that collected background information of the respondents, and then we had the nudge, which refers to reading a policy text, and I will explain more about it in a second. But here I put some background information that we collected in the survey. Just some of it, this is the most important for the analysis. Here, what is important to note is that when we had questions on knowledge, about forest management, economy and environmental aspects, we then combine them to make two different variables describing knowledge. So basically how much they report that they know about forest management and then what their knowledge bias is. So if they know more about the economic and the management side of forests or whether their knowledge is more environmental. And now we get to part two, so to the nudge. So each respondent got to read a policy text that is a part of, is a passage from official recommendations called Tapio in Finland. And the respondents were told that this is a text written by an expert, and the text compared these two forest management practices, so RFM and CCF. And what we did was that we created 4 different versions of this original text, using this metaphorical adjusting of policy text method that was created by and tested by Steen et al. So just briefly, basically we had 4 different versions of the text. So we had business as usual, so the text as it now is in the Tapio sites. Then we had a neutral one that balanced all the facts between business as usual and CCF. And then we had 2 texts that had an emphasis on CCF. The minor one has a metaphorical emphasis on economics, and then the major one uses both economics and ecology in the emphasis. So each respondent got one of these texts to read, and then afterwards they were asked to rate the text. And here are the variables. So we asked them about the preference, about the plausibility, and the understandability. So basically whether they, after having read the text, found that CCF is something worth striving for, whether they found the text convincing, whether it was clear and understandable, etc. And we combined all the variables to make an index from -1 to 1. So -1 will mean low CCF acceptance and 1 high CCF acceptance. So basically we examined how the nudge affects this variable that we created. And here is about the data analysis. So we used linear regression models. And we examined whether the respondent's stance to CCF could be explained by how the nudge affects the cognitive variables that I just briefly introduced, but also whether it could be explained by some combinations, so with different kind of variables included, and we have listed them here below. And the main finding is that yes, linguistic nudging has an effect. So if we frame it in a CCF emphasis way, it has an effect on the perceptions, but the reaction is a lot more complex. So it depends on the stakeholder group, it depends on the age, and it depends on aspects of knowledge. And I will now briefly go through some of the trends that we have found. So basically, we see that forest professionals reject the CCF frame, whereas forest owners accept it and find it plausible. Well, this can be explained by stakeholder characteristic. Forest professionals have been working with the RFM practice for decades, so if they read a text that is positive about CCF, it's something that is in contradiction with their sort of prior behavior and their prior beliefs. Whereas forest owners tend to hold more have a different relation to their forest land. So basically they value recreational aspects of their forests. They have emotional attachments to their forests, so it makes sense that they also accept the message. But the picture becomes more nuanced when we add age into the picture. So old professionals have a lower stance on CCF than the young ones, and for the owners we can see the opposite. So young owners react negatively when they are given a CCF frame, while old owners accept that frame. And this could also be explained by young owners wanting to get more monetized value from their forests, so they might need to. They want to see their forest logged, whereas for older generation this might not be the case. Then a few words about the knowledge. aspect. So here we're talking about knowledge bias. So whether they report to know about economic aspects of forest management or ecology aspects of forest management. And this goes hand in hand with sort of their prior knowledge and what their reaction is. So those people who say, okay, I know a lot about economic aspects and I know a lot about business as usual in forest management, when they read about continuous cover forestry, they reject it and they don't find it plausible. Whereas those who have already a prior preference towards ecological aspects, towards conservation, biodiversity, etc., they accept the text that we presented. But then when we look at the degree of knowledge, so how much they actually know, we can see some variation, and like here there are some trends. What might be interesting here to point is that with the economy bias, those who actually have very little knowledge then accept the message. And the more they know, the more negative they are towards the CCF frame. Yeah? And we also tested gender as one of the variables and the difference between male and female for the nudge, that there wasn't a difference, but we found that in general female accepted the CCF, were more sort of pro-CCF than men. And what is the main takeaway then? Well, we have found that wording matters, that linguistic nudging can be used as a communicational tool in policy interventions and informational interventions. But importantly, the reaction is quite complex and it depends on the characteristics of the receiver. So in the Finnish case, we could suggest that it could be more efficient to show a CCF nudged policy text to old owners and those who already report that they are sort of ecologists, but also to those who have economic knowledge or have a bias on economy, but then hold a poor, like a lower level of knowledge, so don't know a lot about forest management. And as there is a sort of opinion divide between forest owners and forest professionals, it suggests that when talking about CCF to forest professionals, one should be quite moderate and use more business as usual argumentation and wording, because they consistently were reacting negatively towards the sort of CCF frame. And finally, I think this is the biggest point to make as well, is that a one-fits-all communicational strategy is likely not the optimal approach to get the highest acceptability among stakeholders. So then we call for more sensitivity in framing in policy communication. Okay, thank you very much.